Hello everybody! If you want to read all the stories in full, please go to www.steveuk.blog. Thank you. Short Story 606, A Baron's Legacy. Homophones 2. Intermediate. The old Baron Alistair was a man of contrasts. On this particular evening he stood at the top of the grand staircase, his head completely bald, while he bawled at the footman for a small smudge on the mirror. His estate overlooked a stunning series of seaside bays, yet the land itself was so barren he couldn't even grow a vegetable garden. Inside, the long dining table was covered with green baize, but the hall was almost bare of people. As Sue had accepted his invitation to what he called the annual summer ball. He had decided to host the event despite having a notoriously difficult time with entertainment. The famous orchestral band from London had been banned from the premises years ago after a noisy incident, and since then, no musician of note would come near the place. The Baron would have to bear the shame of his simple gramophone for the evening's music. He let out a long sigh as the first guests began to arrive. Suddenly, a dog's sharp bark echoed from the harbour below, where the Baron's last remaining sailing bark was anchored. A renowned travelling bard named Oren had heard of the Baron's social trouble and hoped to earn a quick coin by offering his services. But the gatekeeper, who was still annoyed by the Baron's earlier complaints, had barred his entry. Oren was a skilled lute player, and the deep bass notes of his instruments would have been a great improvement over the gramophone's scratchy tunes. The Baron, however, was in no mood to deal with a new problem. The Baron eventually descended to the crumbling base of the staircase and began to welcome his few guests. With a flourish, he put out some smoked salmon as bait to get them to stay longer, his heart pounding with bated breath at their approval. But the silence in the room was heavy. The footman, still recovering from the Baron's earlier outburst, accidentally dropped a serving tray. In a flash of fury, the Baron turned to the boy, ready to bawl him out again. But instead of rage, he felt only weariness. He looked around the vast, empty hall, at the grand but useless sailing ship in the bay, and the lonely gramophone. This was not a legacy, this was a lonely, pathetic display. He smiled sadly and walked over to the footman. "It's all right, son," he said quietly, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "No harm done. I think the ball is over." The guests looked on in silent confusion as the Baron simply took off his formal coat and walked away, leaving the flickering candles to light the quiet room. Vocabulary notes. Barren. This word is an adjective used to describe land that is unable to produce crops or vegetation. It can also describe a place that is empty or dull, lacking life or interest. From the story, yet the land itself was so barren he couldn't even grow a vegetable garden. Similar words. Infertile, unproductive, desolate, stark. Example sentence. After a long drought, the once green field was left completely barren. Baited. This word is typically used in the phrase with bated breath, which means holding your breath in anticipation or anxiety. It comes from the verb to bate, meaning to lessen or reduce. From the story, his heart pounding with bated breath for their approval. Similar words. Suspended, checked, held. Example sentence. The children watched with bated breath as the magician prepared his final trick. Bark. This is a noun that refers to a type of sailing vessel with at least 3 masts. From the story, where the Baron's last remaining sailing bark was anchored. Similar words. Ship, sailing boat, vessel. Example sentence. A historic bark was brought into the port for restoration. Bard. This is a noun for a poet or minstrel, often one who sings heroic tales. In a modern context, it can refer to any poet. From the story, a renowned travelling bard named Oran had heard of the Baron's social trouble. Similar words: poet, storyteller, minstrel, troubadour. Example sentence. Shakespeare is often referred to as the Bard of Avon. Baize. This is a noun for a coarse, felt-like woolen fabric, typically green, used for covering billiard tables or card tables. From the story, the long dining table was covered with green baize. Similar words: felt, cloth, covering. Example sentence. The card game was played on a small table covered in baize. Story written by Gemini Pro AI. Image created by onemin.ai. To read all the stories in full, please go to www.steveuk.blog. Thank you. CC Music, drifting at 432 Hz. Unicorn heads.
Welcome to the deep dive. We take your sources, unpack them, and really give you that shortcut to being well-informed. Today we're looking at a short story, A Baron's Legacy, Homophones 2, and its vocabulary notes.
Yeah, it's a really interesting piece.
Our mission really is to see how these words that sounded like homophones can actually tell a story full of, well, contrasts and maybe some surprising lessons.
Absolutely. And you see that right from the start, how the story introduces Baron Alistair. It calls him a man of contrast.
It does, yeah. It's almost immediate. You get that physical description, his head completely bald.
Right, serene sounding.
Exactly. But then, almost the next thing you know, he's bald at the footman about a smudge on a mirror.
That juxtaposition is striking, isn't it? Bald.
Yeah.
Bald.
Yeah. The quiet look versus this sudden, loud anger.
And that's the power of using those homophones right there.
Bald.
And bald. They sound identical, but the meanings are worlds apart. It instantly flags up this internal conflict.
It really sets the scene for his whole situation, too. It's not just him, it's his estate.
It overlooks these stunning seaside bays. Sounds idyllic.
Beautiful, yeah.
But then you find out the land itself is so barren, he can't even manage a vegetable patch.
And barren is such a key word there. We think of land that can't grow crops, right? That's the primary meaning.
Sure.
But it also means empty, dull, lifeless. Think of the example sentence provided. After a long drought, the once green field was left completely barren.
Right.
Perfectly mirrors the Baron's life, really. Grand view, but inner emptiness. The estate is grand, but ultimately sterile.
Like a facade. And this carries right into his big social event, the annual summer ball.
Ah, yes, the ball.
You picture this long dining table covered with green baize.
That's baize. That's that thick, woolly fabric, usually green.
Yeah, exactly. Like for card tables or pool tables. So it suggests preparation, maybe even games or festivity.
Setting the scene. The source example is the card game was played on a small table covered in baize.
But the reality, the hall is almost bare of people. Total social isolation. That image of the carefully prepared baize table in a practically empty room, it's quite powerful. It just underscores the loneliness, the failed attempt at connection.
Which kind of begs the question, why even bother hosting? He seems terrible at it.
Well, the story tells us he has a history. There was this famous orchestral band from London.
Oh, yeah.
They got banned from the premises years ago after a noisy incident, whatever that was.
Okay, so no decent musicians wanted to play for him after that.
Exactly. No musician of note would come near the place.
Yeah.
So he's left having to bear the shame of his simple gramophone for the evening's music.
Bear the shame. Wow. That's quite a phrase. It shows his awareness, maybe.
Yeah, and his desperation to keep up appearances even when it's clearly fallen apart. It's almost tragic.
And just when things seem utterly bleak, this potential lifeline appears. A renowned traveling bard named Oran shows up.
Oran the bard. And a bard, is traditionally a poet, a minstrel, someone who brings stories and music, like Shakespeare, the Bard of Avon.
Right. Exactly what the party needed.
He'd heard about the Baron's social problems and thought he could, earn a bit of money. Smart move, potentially.
But there's always a but with this Baron, isn't there?
Always. The gatekeeper's still fuming from being bawled at earlier.
Ah, the mirror incident.
Yep. He'd barred his entry, just locked him out.
No. So the musician, the solution is literally outside the gate.
Literally. Oren, this skilled lute player whose deep bass notes would have been so much better than the gramophone,
A massive upgrade.
was stuck outside. And he'd arrived on a ship, a sailing bark, anchored right there in the harbor.
A bark. Okay, what exactly is a bark?
It's a type of sailing ship, usually has 3 or more masts. The notes give the example. A historic bark was brought into the port for restoration.
Got it. So Oren arrives on his bark.
And it's sitting there,
Yeah.
visible perhaps, while inside the Baron has his own sailing vessel, also described as a bark in the source material, but it's just called grand but useless.
Another symbol of potential just sitting there unused, like Oran himself.
Precisely. Everything is either locked out or just idle potential. Wealth without purpose.
So the story builds towards this this low point for the Baron. He goes downstairs.
To the crumbling base of the staircase, yeah. Trying to salvage the evening.
Putting out smoked salmon as bait, it says. Like he's trying to lure his few guests.
Desperate. And his heart is pounding with bated breath for their approval.
Bated breath. That's an interesting one. What does baited actually mean there?
Baited comes from an old verb, to bait, meaning to lessen or hold back. So with bated breath means you're holding your breath, usually out of anxiety or anticipation.
Okay, makes sense.
Like the example. The children watched with bated breath as the magician prepared his final trick. The Baron is just radiating that nervous tension, hoping for validation.
And then disaster strikes again, or seems to. The footman drops a tray.
The same footman from the mirror incident, presumably still nervous.
And the Baron turns, ready to, well, bawl him out again.
Yeah.
You expect another explosion,
You really do. It feels like the breaking point.
but it's not, is it? Something shifts.
Massively. Instead of rage, the story says he felt only weariness, a deep exhaustion.
And he looks around.
Yeah, he takes it all in. The vast empty hull, that grand but useless sailing ship, the bark again in the bay, the lonely gramophone.
And he finally sees it for what it is.
He does. This moment of crushing self-awareness hits him.
He actually says it, doesn't he? This was not a legacy. This was a lonely, pathetic display.
Powerful words.
Yeah.
And then the interaction with the footman. It's completely different.
He just says, it's all right, son. No harm done.
A moment of unexpected grace. And then the final line from him. I think the ball is over.
Wow. It's quiet, but it feels huge. Like acceptance, maybe even the start of something new, even if it's just ending the pretense.
Exactly. It's a surrender, but maybe a freeing one. So when we step back and think about this story, especially for you, the learner,
Yeah, what's the takeaway here?
it's how these specific words, these homophones, barren land, bated breath, the bark in the bay, the arrival of the bard, the baize on the table, even the bald head and the bawling.
They're not just decoration.
Not at all. They're
Yeah.
integral. They create layers of meaning, they build the character, they underscore the themes of emptiness, and finally, realization. Understanding why the author chose that specific word gives you those aha moments.
It really deepens the reading experience. We went from his appearance versus his temper,
To the land's beauty versus its sterility.
the prepared table versus the empty room.
The potential rescuer barred at the gate.
And finally, that moment of anxious hope turning into weary acceptance. Those key words, barren, baited, bark, barred, baize, they charted that whole journey.
And that skill, that ability to notice the nuances in language is so valuable. It's not just for analyzing stories.
So?
Well, think about all the information you consume every day. News articles, reports, even just conversations. Paying attention to word choice, to potential double meanings, to the way things are phrased. It helps you get beyond the surface.
It's like a shortcut to deeper understanding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It helps you become more critically aware, more
Right.
truly well-informed, because you're not just taking things at face value. You're seeing the layers.
So as we leave the Baron there, in his quiet hall, maybe the ball really is over for him in more ways than one. It makes you think.
Mhm.
If that whole grand setup, the estate, the title, the ball, if that wasn't a real legacy, just a lonely, pathetic display, as he called it, what does make something a legacy? What builds lasting value?
That's a great question. Is it the grand structures, or something else entirely.
And maybe even, how can those bare or barren spots in our own lives, things that feel like failures or emptiness, could they actually be where real transformation begins, like it was for the Baron, perhaps?
That's definitely something to ponder. Where does true value lie? And can emptiness sometimes be the space needed for growth?
Lots to think about. That was a fascinating dive.
It really was. The power of words.